So I'm just Chris, I'm a dev. Like that's what I do day in, day out. But outside of work I like to tutor, mentor, teach. Spent 12 years kind of learning to be a .NET dev, doing it, and then over the past kind of few years I've learned to kind of get more people involved in the industry. When I first started doing development, I kind of thought that the old stereotypes were just a thing of the past, you know, the things you see on TV. And then I kind of went to a course and it turned out it wasn't, but why is it? Like, that was something which nagged in the back of my head because it's something which everybody interacts with on a day-to-day basis, right? Like, you might want, or might expect more people to want to know how it works or how it's interested, so where's that divide come from? And I still don't know the answers to this, but it's something I'm thinking about, and as a dev, as somebody who interacts, what can I do and how can I help? So what I'm going to take a look at today is kind of roughly what the state of play is, you know, ideas of how we can change things, move things forward, whether it's, you know, something we want. Because there's genuinely still people out there who think that maybe it should be the way it is because that's how it's always been, right? So where are we at the moment? So what you'll see is here, this is just what people describe as like the diversity dividend. It's something that's really difficult to kind of quantify because these are all things where the data's not always there. There aren't always companies keeping data on what the diversity is inside the businesses. But from a purely kind of commercial aspect, it seems to make sense. If you can represent your clients better, then surely you're going to be better in the marketplace. Or if you are currently in one market and you want to expand, then get people involved, get people who you do want to market to who aren't. Because you can't make stuff if you don't have those experiences, right? So this is something that plays into what I was saying earlier on. So why do I particularly kind of care about these things? Because we've all had these moments. And why have we kind of had these moments? So usually the software's not developed by somebody who is like me or like, you know, somebody else. I tried to park earlier on. Okay, outside, I came early, so it's before 6. I had to try and use the online or the call, you know, machine, whatever it is. I couldn't get it to work. It's an absolute nightmare. You call up, it's the wrong location, it's the wrong code, it's the wrong car that the phone already thinks I own. It's not to my partners. We went to Leeds, you know, a while ago, and it seems really simple. How can this be an oversight? How can this not have happened? It's because the person who wrote it probably understands how it works. The person who tested it might understand how it works. But if they're not the people who are using it, then they've missed the boat. What's the point? So that's kind of why I put this little gif of The Simpsons from the 90s in, because this is what immediately it reminds me of. I've kind of gone through most of the points on here, but there are genuine, real issues. So I just talked about the inconvenience of trying to park, right? But there are real issues that come from these things. I've worked in healthcare previously. Now, imagine if you test a drug on just one section of society, right? You know, it's great, it works for them, but that's not all of society. You know, you could say, okay, it works for, you know, a 50-year-old man who's from Leicester. That's great, but the world's bigger than Leicester, and there's more people in Leicester than just that 50-year-old man. So these drugs, if they're, you know, potentially given to people who's not been tested on, you might not get the outcomes that you expected because you tested it on the wrong people. Most people know about seatbelts. They were tested on the 50th percentile man, right? I'm not 50th percentile man. I'm 5'6", you know. Women aren't 50% man, right? So why did we do that? We got fatalities from these things. I personally believe that, like, this is a great industry. It's given me a really good life. I've enjoyed it. I like to know how things work. Why can't that be open to everybody? So something I've tried to do in recent years is kind of be a bit of an evangelist, kind of without, you know, banging on people who aren't interested. If somebody has a bit of interest, let's, you know, talk to them. Let's try and nourish that interest. Maybe they can be, and I've done this, I've mentored many people who are better than me, way better, you know. They pick up ideas like that. I wish I could do that. But as they go into the industry, they come up against issues. The recruiters who want to talk to me don't talk to them. I say, oh, this is a great person, I've had a great experience. And then it goes silent for them. So what's going on? But it looks like we're actually improving. It's very slow. And if my, you know, bank interest rate was 1.3% over 10 years, I don't think I'd be very happy, right? So this is just focusing on women on the left. I've also put socioeconomic background on the right, and you'll notice that some of these data are quite old, and I'll get onto this in the end. We have a huge data issue, right? A lot of the information is either old or missing, or I mentioned it earlier, how many businesses are actually collecting data on who they're employing, what's going on, how they're, representing people that they're dealing with. So that's something which I didn't actually realise. It's something we all have experience of. I used to say that my SLT were cookie cutter impressions of each other. They all look the same, they all talk the same. And that really struck home, like, okay, there's 7% of the people in the UK go to private schools, but yet a third of them are in senior leadership teams. Here's a slide that I used a while ago that's actually got kind of in one slide as much as they could try and cover, but some of it's a little bit wrong. Again, you've got 600,000 vacancies in tech. Well, there's 1.3 million vacancies full stop at the moment in the UK. So how come there's 600,000? What it turns out is that there's people describing their own roles, or when they're advertising in the marketplace, is this a tech-related role? Well, again, it goes back to what we were saying. The world is surrounded by tech. I'm doing this presentation on technology. It's everywhere. So most of them are. So take that with a pinch of salt. The actual number of software jobs that are open at the moment are probably about 120,000. I'm talking in front of Haynes and the recruitment agencies, so those guys will probably have a better idea on this than me. This is a really good one, though, the costs of lack of diversity and lack of inclusion to the economy, right? So yeah, there might only be a certain type of person doing it, but by narrowing that resource pool, by narrowing that talent pool, there's going to be knock-on consequences. There are going to be real issues that come from that. Like I was saying, the seatbelt, the medicine examples, but also financially. It's a lack of innovation, people with ideas that aren't at the table, that we need at the table. So I'll move swiftly on. How do we get here? So this is a picture from 1968. In the computer world, the IBM S360 is one of the first management systems. Before that, computers kind of held data, and they were for data processing, but this computer was it could run payrolls and things, actually quite sophisticated, particularly by 1968. And what you see here is a picture from an article in Cosmopolitan, and it shows that programming was a women's game back then. It's what's gone wrong. Why are there less women in tech? And what we realised was that up until the 1980s, it was this, and people told me this, and it's all numbers, and I was like, okay, that makes sense. But my mum used to teach programming. She did programming. She was a computer teacher in her spare time, doing what I'm doing now. And she stopped. I never knew that she did this. She stopped in the 1980s, and I wondered, why is this going on? And there's still to this day, there's been no idea, and we're trying to redress the balance that was to back then. So what kind of barriers of entry are there? So I tried to think of the picture of a stereotypical programmer, and those are really unhelpful kind of pictures came up. So I went with this one instead, because this I think it's something that anyone can do, right? Even the cat. So unhelpful perceptions of coding and culture. If you all kind of close your eyes and you think of a programmer, we're all going to kind of come up with similar or different ideas depending on your experiences. And I hope they're more different. I hope we're better than we were 10 years ago, and I think we are. Personally, I'm mentoring people who are from different perspectives, which is great. The second point is something which I've got personal experience of, and I don't know if anybody else has this. When I was learning to program, when I was trying to develop skills in my job or anything, I was reading kind of guides and things, and they were written as if I already knew it. Like, what good's that? I don't know this already. I want it to be taught as if I'm 5. If you can't explain to me as if I'm 5, then maybe the person doesn't know themselves. I'm trying to give a presentation, I'm trying to talk, and I think about this with myself. If I can't explain to someone who's 5 years old, then maybe I don't understand it myself. Yeah, perceived lack of role models. Now, the key word there is perceived. There are role models. Like I was saying, it's largely considered programming was a women's thing before the 1980s. So there's plenty of role models. It's just they're not in our face. We can all talk about Alan Turing. There was a great film about Alan Turing. We can all talk about Tim Berners-Lee. He was at the opening of the Olympic ceremony. But there's people like Hedy Lamarr, who was an actress in her time, but on the side she developed the technology which allows us to connect to Wi-Fi networks. Okay, so there's a reason that when we connect to Wi-Fi, we're not all talking to each other and we get this crosstalk like when you tune in a radio and you get 2 stations at once. And that's because of Hedy Lamarr. So people didn't really know this, they just thought she was an actress. But as the years went by, this stuff kind of became more prevalent. People realised actually her name's on the academic papers, and towards the end of her life, thankfully, got some awards for it. Katherine Johnson, so this is someone who there is actually a film about. So this is one of my favourite films of the last few years, actually. Died recently, unfortunately, Katherine Johnson, but she's the reason that people went to space, essentially. So the moon landings in 1969. She's worked as part of the Apollo missions and got there in the end. Sophie Wilson. We're in Leeds. Sophie Wilson was part of the BBC Micro team, and there's a film called Micro Men, which is about how the BBC Micro came about, essentially. Basically, not really an icon, because not very high profile, but a fantastic, trans person in technology who's given a lot. Stephanie Shirley, or Steve. So her nickname was Steve because of the imbalances in the industry. She thought it'd be easier to be called Steve. And she set up her company, which did the black box flight recorders for Concorde. And that company, not only did it do the black box flight recorders, it also did. She also set up academies within the business to make it more inclusive, get more people into tech. Which is exactly what I'm talking about, but she did it decades ago. You know what I mean? There are these people out there. Unesh Ansari went to space, funded herself. She was the CEO of Telecom Technologies and sold it for a huge amount of money. I think she was the first privately funded female astronaut in 2006. But each of these people could have an entire presentation on themselves. I love talking about them, they're great. Anything that's inspiration is fantastic. Okay, so blind recruitment, again, I'm talking about recruitment in front of recruiters. This is going to be quite difficult, right? But there's some evidence behind this. So back in 2016, Speak with a Geek did a test where they took 5,000 people, put them towards hiring managers with names and without names. With names, 4% of the female applicants got an interview request. Without names, 54%. So I'm pretty sure those hiring managers won't describe themselves as discriminatory, but that's kind of gives you a good idea of that discrimination isn't always there and obvious. I don't think many people describe themselves as discriminatory, but it's inherent. So little things like blind recruitment. I'll get on to the next slide about something else that you can do to kind of combat this as well, which is it takes a lot of effort and something I personally hate, but I think is a great idea. Like task-based recruitment. So instead of doing it based on a CV, you do it based on actual skills. If you've ever used Ackers online, it's like a way of, I use it to learn new things and try them out online. It's a really good way of doing it. Education and work is quite difficult. It's always kind of 9 to 5, it's always Monday to Friday. What happens if you've got kids? What happens if you need to look after, childcare, you've got sports day, things like this to do. It's something which as managers we can kind of accommodate and we can be really good at, right? So why don't we? Why are we stuck between these times? And we've just come out the back of a pandemic, which has been fantastic for working from home, remote working and flexible working. And we're being told that, go back into the office. Well, some people, that's great. I miss having conversations, making coffee, right? But, if I've got childcare or, someone else to care for, anything that requires being outside work that's a priority to me above work, then I want that to be facilitated. So something I was actually involved in, I was an AI researcher at the University of Hull. There's a kind of saying in AI that the decisions they make are only as good as the data they're based on, okay? Now if you're basing your data for recruitment algorithms or whatever else it is, they're going to reinforce the kind of biases that are inherent in that data set, okay? I showed you, I talked about the percentages there, 5 to 54% of women. The algorithm's going to reinforce that 5%, not reinforce that 54% because it's going to look at the hiring tendencies of real life people. Okay, bottom one, lack of data. I've already mentioned it. It's probably the biggest point throughout, to me. That's my personal opinion. Right, next slide is that possible solutions bit. So this is just me brainstorming things, and I hope after I finish speaking, if anybody's got any ideas, things we can add to this, or any questions around any of them, let's have a talk. Something I missed off about this, which again, second-hand experience of it, colleagues who have like religious beliefs and they're just not catered for at work. So you need a space to pray, or you need managers to understand when you need time off for religious reasons, whether it's things like, you know, Eid or any other kind of religious Rosh Hashanah. That's one of the points I missed off here, but as part of allies and management, I think that's a huge one. There's loads you can do as a manager. Often you're kind of squeezed to be a manager. There's people putting pressure on it from above, and oftentimes we hire our managers based on their performance in an unrelated role. If you do well as a software developer, there's a chance you get promoted into a management role. Now, by being good at a software development role, does that make you good for management? But you can support those people if you do think they'll be a good manager. Again, senior leadership, there are plenty of leadership training things to do, and I hope that they cover things like this. So something I'm involved in is targeted ready for work boot camps. So I emphasise ready to work just because there are boot camps out there for everything and everyone. They can teach you to code in 30 days, that's great, but if there's no job at the end of it, how's that going to get people into the industry, right? So I think they're a huge part. I'm currently involved in one called Coding Black Females, which is under communities there. STEMX is another great one, and the BCS, because it's the old industry standard, but it still has some good things out there. It has resources, has CV checkers, things like that. And it can do, you know, great discounts for people who are training, but I'm not here to promote them. They're not paying me for this, so you guys do your own research. The communities are out there, okay? One thing I'd like to see more businesses do is kind of supporting, you know, there's tax breaks for donating to charity, right? So if there's already great organisations and charities out there doing this research, then let's fund them, let's get involved as businesses, as senior leadership teams. Because there's everything we can do as ourselves, but we've got a business to run. So let's start getting involved in people who know about these things. You know, I'm no expert, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I might know a little bit, and I might know a lot more if I get somebody else involved who does this day in, day out. Yeah, there's task-based recruitment. It's something I despise because I've had some bad experiences. I don't know if there's people in tech here who've been given task experiences. They're like, write an API for me. And you're like, right, well, there goes 2 days of my life for a job that I might not even get an interview for, right? But there are good task-based recruitment strategies, I promise you, and they exist. And then at the bottom, better data. I'll go over to the next slide, but we will go back to that one. So that's the end of my talk, but I'd like to know, you know, what kinds of things people would, you know, think are missing out of things I've said, or what else we can involve, and any general questions on, you know, what we've spoken about. So feel free to kind of put hands up, ask questions, and contribute. Cool. I'll go back to that slide. Cool. Any questions at all? Go for it.
There's a big lean towards young people coming into the industry and striving for a career path.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I'm not one of those young people, and I've had a career path. And you maybe get to a point in your career where you just want to follow along.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of pressure for the next step and the next stage. And there doesn't often seem to be a strategy in organisations to accommodate that. And that's not including the older generation. And we're pushed to work to our, you know, nearly 70 now, it's got to 68, I think it is. So we're missing a whole gap there of experience, knowledge, but you feel like you're squeezed to go somewhere that you don't necessarily want to go. So I think that's a kind of diversity that is missing.
100%. You hit on something really good actually as well. My entire presentation was quite skewed towards people coming into the industry. And that shows kind of inherent bias as well. I didn't set out to do it that way, but that's my experience, so that's how it ended up, right? And that kind of links into what I was saying earlier about it's not about explicitly doing this stuff. In regards to actually career progressions, big time. I've often had to move, like personally speaking, I've had to move jobs to get career progression a lot of times. And that's not easy to do, particularly if you have to kind of, you know, you've got a family or something, you've got to move to a different place to get that opportunity, right? So I think I kind of want input from, you know, someone else who's kind of put these pathways in place. I used to work for a company called Eurofins, and they were scientific based. They did the forensics for the police in the UK, and they would identify people and put kind of career questions in place, and also get people to rewrite their job descriptions, which I thought was awesome. Because if you rewrite your job description, then it more accurately reflects what you're actually doing day to day, and it also gives you the opportunity to progress because you're having those, mandated yearly checkups or 6 monthly checkups, things like that. So they're things that have kind of helped me. As far as the actual making sure that you linking it back into the presentation again, if you get diversity in progression, if we have data on how people are kind of being promoted, how we're represented at SLT level, so we don't get that cookie cutter approach to higher management that I was talking about, then maybe we won't get, we will get different people, and I hope that helps. I think there's examples of it as well. I just don't have them. Does that answer your question?
It was more about the lack of aspiration, because you've probably got to the point where you're happy and you don't want to progress further.
Yeah.
Every time you have an appraisal, it's what next thing do you want to aim for? We've got this promotion. Well, I don't want a promotion. I don't want to manage people. And it's what we can put in place that makes it diverse for those individuals and interesting without having to aim for the top.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's really difficult to talk about as well, because you're always shown the kind of that people should be looking for the next step.
You've always got to climb the ladder, you can't traverse.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting.
It's quite an interesting one, sorry.
Okay.
We work at a company called Logic, and before I worked here, I'd never worked somewhere like this, and we're low hierarchy. So really quite a flat structure where there isn't that kind of obvious management role. So we don't have like line managers or senior management or anything like that. It's a lot more kind of skill based. So like we're doing quite a bit of work in our EDI committee at the moment on targeting or looking at people, who might be in the older generation who either are starting out or who are at that point where they think, I don't want to go any further, and we're quite lucky to be low hierarchy and not have that pressure to be a manager. And like you said, working, in tech, I might be good at, being an architect, but it doesn't mean I'm a people manager. So we've kind of taken that bit out of it. So to progress, it's more skill-based progression rather than people progression. So
someone actually, I haven't read the book, but somebody wrote a book, didn't they, called The Peter Principle, which is what you said is actually a phenomenon of people being promoted to their level of incompetence. It's like the tagline for the book. Because, you might be good at being a dev, but you might not. I think a lot of companies have that track where you would naturally progress being a manager, but there might be two tracks where you just stay technical and you kind of, mentor people, have more oversight, coach them, whatever, versus if you wanted to be a manager, you could go down that route.
I think that raises an interesting point of, I guess, the solutions that you put up there. Is it something like a paradigmatic shift that we need in how organisations are structured and managed rather than, and I think, what you were talking about really is a flatter hierarchy. And interestingly, I was wondering whether your flatter hierarchy translates into more equal remuneration as well, those sorts of things. But I think the point that you raised about what would you want to do next, that sort of thing as well, is the siloed nature of working. Should we be looking at breadth as well as depth as well, because that gives you the skills that you do need to progress and to envision and lead organisations, but also lead teams.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to input on the remuneration point or
I don't know what remuneration really.
How much you get
paid? So it's one that we're kind of working on at the moment. I think, the company that I work for a few years ago were about 40 employees, so that low structure was so much easier because we could kind of just get in really knowledgeable, experienced people. But we've broadened now, so we'll get people at the beginning of the journey. So obviously there's always sort of like a natural in the background hierarchy, but in terms of skill sets, like I might know that somebody has more knowledge than me and have been in this industry a lot longer, so I'll know potentially that they'll have more skill sets in something, therefore that will more than likely obviously reflect the pay. But it's more kind of skills and knowledge than you know, a manager might get a pay rise because I'm now going to manage people. That's what's kind of been taken out of it. And as the company's grown, we've got these really soft management roles, just to kind of support from a kind of team well-being and communication point of view. But again, these are kind of like don't reflect your pay. It's quite optional, and you could be this soft management for one project and go off it on another if you don't like it. It's more of a communication piece, but wouldn't reflect pay. It's more skills and knowledge base.
I think we've also just naturally sort of paid above market rates as well generally, which I think is good for employee retention. But I guess you've got to balance it, haven't you?
Yeah.
With, you know, not putting people in very, very defined pay brackets where, you know, if they have gone above and beyond and built those management skills, you can extend them out of that as well.
So work in progress as the company's growing. So it's something like Lauren, you're working on as well, aren't you, in terms of job descriptions and things like that. But on the whole, it works really well to have that kind of structure.
I think it's a company aim as well.
Yeah.
For this to be turned into the hour.
No, I need to kind of ramp up.
If you have a mission, one of our EDI missions is to increase our number of female employees, other, you know, ethnic diversity and other characteristics within our company, because for the reasons that you've mentioned, and as well that we perform better, we've got a better understanding of customers, with each other, is all important, and it's a goal, so that's why we do it.
Just to kind of touch on the paradigm shift, I don't think it needs that. I think the power's in the hands of the people who are being hired, right? More so now than ever. There's more vacancies than we've seen, certainly in my lifetime. So people will vote with their feet. I was once told, and this was the most powerful thing I was told when I was looking for jobs, because I was trying to be something, or what people thought I should be. And they said, don't worry about what the company does or says, find your tribe, right? If you find the people who represent the values you have, then you'll probably be happier in your job. They'll represent you, you'll feel morally satisfied in what you do, and you'll be working for a cause that you believe in. So I think if enough people have that mindset, that they need to find their tribe, then I think management and businesses will adapt. As you've seen with you guys, you're clearly taking steps to adapt, better represent, and, you know, commercially see the benefits of that, as well as, you know, morally, ethically, and everything else. I'm going to kind of close it there and hand over. But thank you for your time, everybody, and I really do appreciate it.
The moment of truth, does the tech swap over work?
I didn't practice with my phone in my hands. You actually got that right, I want to pop it somewhere else.
I've gone old school today with some little notes. So how is everybody feeling this evening? Enjoying it so far? Chris was excellent, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Really, really interesting. Thank you for that. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of the conversation tonight, Tom. I feel honoured to have a seat at the table amongst all you people, and absolutely a little bit of imposter syndrome as well myself when I was writing this. I would really, really love if this session is interactive. You are going to get more out of what I'm talking about the more you participate and get into it, really. I see some people who know have seen me before smiling at me at the back. That feels nice. It's always an invitation, though. It's not a summons. You don't have to participate if you would rather not. But let's have a little practice. So please put your hand up if you know that you are struggling with imposter syndrome, or you suspect that you might be and you're curious about it. Cool. Awesome. That's about right for the population. Okay. Wonderful. So I was really, really pleased to be asked to talk to you this evening, because I think that imposter syndrome is absolutely a key part of the whole conversation about diversity and inclusion. It comes with it, so we really, really need to talk about this thing. And delving into how we feel about ourselves can be absolutely illuminating. I have seen countless people break free and kind of experience that transformation that breaking free from imposter syndrome can give you. And then they are able to bring their whole authentic selves to work, which is what we're trying to get to with the D&I conversation, right? And that is what I'm going to be teaching today. So what you are going to learn in today's session is we're going to go through the 7 biggest signs of imposter syndrome. You're going to understand the 3 biggest mistakes that we make, and hopefully there will be some light bulbs in this section. You are going to get to understand your own personal imposter a little bit. And then I'm going to teach you my 5 steps to freedom strategy, so that whenever imposter syndrome rears its ugly head, and it will do in the future, it doesn't need to stop you, and you can still do what you want to do. So, first things first. My name is Claire Ackers. Gosh, that makes the imposter syndrome flare up, seeing me that big on the screen there. I call myself an authenticity coach, and what that basically means is that I work with values-led founders and their teams to help them work out who they are, what they stand for, and then have the courage to live that every day. My background is an award-winning recruiter, I'm a manager, I'm a founder and a director. Bit of a serial entrepreneur. I have founded and grown 2 businesses so far. And my company is called Adesse, which is comes from the Latin phrase, posse adesse, which means from possibility into reality. And that's the philosophy that I try and live my life by, the kind of the whole art of the possible. If you can dream it, you can achieve it type philosophy. And I founded my company in 2015 when I was on maternity leave with my 2nd child from a shed quarters in my back garden. Married with 3 kids. I'm co-director with my husband. I founded the company, and then he quit his corporate job with all the benefits to come and work with me for me. We never quite worked out the hierarchy. And then we live and work together in North Leeds, in Farsley, if anybody knows that part of the world. And we have managed to have another child together since working together as well, so it can't be all that. So, imposter syndrome. I know about it because I've been there. I have got a long history of trying to fit in, of trying to do the acceptable thing, of trying to please everybody and do the conventional things. You know, be a good girl, sit in the corner, don't cause any trouble, just get good grades and don't cause any trouble, essentially. Basically, of letting my imposter syndrome hold me back from doing what I really wanted, or even admitting to myself what I really, really wanted. So this photo here, I was 23, this is my first job. And you can't see in this picture, but I've got Mont Blanc cufflinks on there. And I was a recruiter's award-winning lunch thingy. You kind of go as like a reward, like, I don't even know, do they still exist in the industry, Tom? Like lunch things, lunch club things? Yeah.
Yeah, they exist.
Yeah, 23, absolutely loaded. But I was so unhappy because I was trying to fit into the company. And it basically took divorce before the age of 30, quitting alcohol, going no contact with my parents for many, many different reasons, which I will tell you about at a different point if you're interested. Before I had my epiphany, I basically said, this is not my life. This is not my life. And then basically since then, I've tried to cause as much trouble as I can and help my clients do so as well. Other examples of imposter syndrome. So this one here, this is on the BBC Business Breakfast News famous red carpet where I was invited on as an expert. Big case of imposter syndrome when I went on there. This one here is has anyone heard of Lean In Leeds? Yeah, cool. So I'm, Lean In is a 990 strong community, a tribe of, our basic aim is gender equality. I'm co-chair. This is me organising, or being keynote speaker in our first conference we did in 2019. I'd had a baby 5 weeks ago. I have no idea what I said during that speech, but can you see here, this is a server room under here at AQL, if anyone knows that. Walking out on that stage in heels, in front of all those people with this glass floor here, now that triggers some imposter syndrome, let me tell you. And then this one here, This is coming second to last, or as I like to call it, penultimate, in a half marathon. The official race photographer, it's the Settle half marathon, so fairly undulating, it's fair to say. And the photographer managed to get such an amazing photo of me running up a hill because there was nobody behind me. And I had the biggest case of imposter syndrome before going and doing that race. I nearly didn't even show up on the day because I thought I was going to embarrass myself. They were all going to be waiting in the car park for me to finish. And they were, to be fair, but I did it because the biggest race is with yourself, right? And I've just signed up to do the virtual London Marathon today as well. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes. And the point is I get imposter syndrome popping up all the time. I've got it sitting at the back there listening to Chris. I thought, oh my gosh, he's brilliant. How on earth am I going to stand up here and try and follow that? But with a strategy, you don't need to let it stop you. So, who here, when you listen to my story, who here resonates with this? Who here looks successful on paper, has got qualifications coming out of their ears, has won awards, has got all the accolades, and yet still feels that imposter, who can't enjoy that success, maybe feels that they don't deserve to be here, and lack confidence in their own ability. I'd love to see a show of hands if you feel comfortable enough in sharing. Thank you. Thank you. Just shout out, when I tell my story, what comes up for you as I say all this? Anything you like, what comes into your mind?
Comparison to others.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Admiration for you.
Strength for you to talk about those incidents as well.
It's that meeting expectations, isn't it?
I think past traumas play a role too.
Yeah.
I think.
Hold that thought, we're going to get into that.
How far have you got to go to get what it is that you want, what you're seeking?
Yeah. Tom, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, sure, yeah. Go ahead.
So the way that I look at it is that I spent the first 3 decades of my life people pleasing and doing what was acceptable, and then I had this awakening. So 30 to 40 was this gradual awakening, and I was 40 in March, and my kind of mission from here on in is giving 0 fucks and just going all in. So 7 signs of imposter. Here are the 7 biggest signs. So just make a little mental note of which one of these you resonate with. So number 1 is you feel a fraud or a phony. It is only a matter of time before somebody taps you on the shoulder and says, who the hell are you? What do you think you're doing here? There's been a mistake. I'm sorry. Who here resonates with that one?
Yeah.
Okay. Number 2 is you attribute your success to luck, or being in the right place at the right time, or nepotism, or being a tick box exercise, anything but having earned it. Anyone resonate with that one? Okay. Number 3 is you seek approval or permission. You don't trust your own judgment or intuition, so you wait for the green light from somebody else to do what you actually want to do. And a desperate need for recognition comes into this one as well. Anyone for that one? Cool, okay. Number 4 is you are a chronic overachiever. My God, have you got something to prove? You work your bum off and you over-prepare for stuff, but the problem is that you never feel secure and you can never relax and enjoy that success. Anyone for that one? Cool.
Well, let's have a look when I do that one.
Number 5 is a really interesting one. Who's heard this phrase, new level, new devil? Oh, it's not one of my favourites. So new level, new devil is basically when you do something, you step outside your comfort zone, and that old imposter pops up, like a new devil pops out to go, hang on a minute, who the hell do you think you are? Get back in your box. Yeah, you have big dreams, but imposter is keeping you small, and any time you step outside your comfort zone, that devil pops up to make you hush and get back in that box. Number 6, oh, I was doing this one today. You procrastinate. Now this is a really, really good way of keeping busy, so you don't actually have to engage with the stuff that's going to move the needle. It's kind of that idea of being a busy fool. I was dancing around my office to Depeche Mode today rather than like this. Now there's an admission. True story. And it can also manifest as being too busy. So it's not just that you're doing other stuff, it's that you're far too busy to actually engage with the stuff that's going to move the needle. And then number 7 is always a biggie. You obsess over mistakes or criticism. I see this one all the time. So you lie awake obsessing over a small mistake that nobody else ever noticed, or you take somebody else's criticism or constructive criticism to heart and you take it as fact. Anyone got that one? Okay.
Mistakes but not criticism.
Okay, cool. Has anybody got a full house? Wow. Kudos to you for calling it. Own that. Okay, so we're going to go on to the 3 biggest mistakes. I say this is in my works of working with business owners and leaders, mainly in the. Have we got a good spread of tech and HR people here tonight, and recruitment people? Yeah, perfect. They're my main sector, so I'll be interested to see how you resonate with this one. Okay. So mistake number 1. So just listen to this and see if it resonates, if it rings true for you. Mistake number 1 is thinking that I'm nobody special. So if you answer yes to this one, it doesn't matter how many qualifications you've got, how many awards you've got, how many accolades, how many testimonials, how many promotions you've had. People see you in high regard, but they even consider you brilliant, but you yourself are not one of them. You just can't see it. Because deep down, you know that you're a fake, you're an imposter, you're a fraud. And to the outside world, you are capable and brilliant and accomplished, but secretly you are worrying that you're barely even competent. And when you do nail the pitch or smash the presentation, which you almost always do, you see it as being a fluke or being lucky, and you never feel that you deserve the reward. And that people around you would be shocked to know that you lie awake at night worrying about that you're going to get found out. And if you resonate with this one, you're already successful. Maybe you're not a CEO or top salesperson or HR director or whatever it is, but you've done something to feel fraudulent about, is the main thing. And it is estimated that around 70% of professionals suffer from imposter syndrome, which is incredible really, isn't it? Absolutely incredible that's it's so prevalent, and that's from a study from psychologist Gail Matthews. So if you believe this on mistake number 1, you will say things like, I got lucky, I was in the right place at the right time, it's because they like me, if I can do it, anybody can, they'll let anybody into this place, somebody must have made a terrible mistake, I had help to do it, I had connections, they're just being nice, they've just felt sorry for me. Okay, hands up for mistake number 1. Who resonates with that one? Okay. Mistake number 2 is listening to your imposter and then playing small because of it. Letting your imposter, that saboteur, that little voice, the devil on your shoulder, mine sounds like my mum's voice, have the upper hand and have the say in how you live your life. And when you listen to your imposter, you end up trying to fit in, sacrificing your dreams and what you love to do in order to be accepted or acceptable. There's a brilliant quote that somebody said to me the other day, which I'm going to completely mess up now, which is, imposter syndrome isn't what I think of me, it isn't what you think of me, it's what I think you think of me. Does that make sense? Get your head around that one? Which, yeah, I thought that was a really, really interesting one. Number 2, listening to your imposter, you can end up living the life that you think you deserve rather than one you dream of. And you were too scared to be real or authentic or vulnerable, back to that D&I conversation, and make real connection, because there's always a part you're holding back. And it feels shameful and horrible and inauthentic, and is such a waste of who you can be. And if you listen to that imposter, you can lie awake and take even the most constructive criticism to heart and as fact. Or, in this one as well, how about if you actually make a mistake? So, I did one a couple of weeks ago. I was sending out an email for a masterclass, and it auto sent it out, and I forgot to, I sent the wrong stuff out basically, and my imposter immediately said, right, that's it, who the hell are you to run this business, you better go quit and go and get a job, everyone's going to think you're terribly unprofessional, and it's all over for you basically. But, doing the work that I do, I was able to pipe it down and just accept everyone makes mistakes, it's no biggie. Who resonates with mistake number 2?
Sometimes.
Cool. Mistake number 3 is self-sabotaging. Oh, this is an interesting one. Oh, did I hear a murmur of recognition there? Cool, okay. So, self-sabotaging is when you have a success and for a moment it feels absolutely great. You are absolutely on top of the world. But because you are not comfortable with that level of success, you do something to self-sabotage and bring yourself right back down to the level of comfort and familiarity, even if it is not what you actually want. So I'm sure you've all heard the story of lottery winners. They win millions, and then they've blown it all within the year and are back on benefits or in debt or whatever it is because they are not comfortable with that level of wealth. Has anyone read the book The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks? He goes into it a lot in that we have an internal thermostat, an upper and lower limit of what we're able to tolerate. Really, really interesting. Recommend you check it out if you like that concept. So this self-sabotage, the problem with it is that it creates a cycle of evidence. You do something, you self-sabotage, that you then get the evidence to say, see, I shouldn't have tried doing that, and then next time you don't even bother doing it again. So who here knows that they self-sabotage?
Put up 2 hands for that one.
Well, hands for that one.
2 hands.
2 hands.
Yeah, I do that a lot.
Okay. But the thing with imposter syndrome, this is the key bit, and this is where I get really, really excited, is it's just your mind trying to keep you safe. So 4% of your brain is conscious, which means that 96% of your brain is running on subconscious programming. And most of this is for our own protection. So for example, remembering to breathe while we're sleeping. We don't want to have to consciously remember to do that. But sometimes when it comes to our belief systems, things can get a little bit sticky there. Your mind's primary objective is to keep you safe. Not happy, not successful, not self-actualized, it's just to keep you safe. And safety, to your mind, is familiarity. Think of it like water running downhill. It's always going to find that path of least resistance. It's that familiarity. So whenever you do anything that's a step outside your comfort zone, it's that old fight or flight mechanism kicks in straight away, the adrenaline comes in, and you will do anything subconsciously to ricochet yourself back to the safe and the familiar. This is why willpower doesn't work. This is why you can't just snap out of it and decide to do something different one day, because your mind will panic and you will self-sabotage, or somebody else will show up in your life to bring you right back to that safe and familiar. And that is where imposter syndrome comes into thing. Is this landing with people? Is this seeming familiar? Cool. We don't want it to stop us though, do we? So we have got our 5 steps to freedom. We're going to go back to the origin story. So this is where you get to find out your own particular brand of imposter. We're going to go back to your origin story. So everybody's got a different particular brand of imposter, and yours will come from your parents, it'll come from your friends, it'll come from your teachers, it'll come from your friends' parents, it'll come from any organisations you're involved in, like church or brownies or scouts, or any of that stuff. That's where our imposter will originate. And there will have been an incident, something that happened to you between the ages of 5 and 7 that kick-started your own particular brand of imposter. So for example, that age, I put my hand up in class to answer a question, got the answer completely wrong, and everybody in the whole class fell about laughing at me, including the teacher. Fairly scarring experience. And you can imagine, it took me years to get over that one. And I couldn't do what I do for my day job now with that hanging around me, so I had to do the work on that. But yeah, it took years to feel safe being visible again. And as adults, the incident that happened between the ages of 5 and 7, it might not be a big deal. You might be able to historicise it, you might be able to put it into context. It might just be a passing comment that kick-started it for you. But as kids, you just soak up that limiting belief, accept it as gospel, and it becomes part of your story. And it absolutely affects how you show up at work these days as an adult. The stories you tell yourself, the risks that you dare to take, it's all there. So a little story. So I've got some client stories here. Stories are all true, names have been changed. So let's talk about Alex. So Alex is a extremely successful recruitment business founder in Leeds. She'd done really well growing her recruitment company, and she decided that she wanted to grow a consultancy arm of her recruitment company, do something different and diversify. But her origin story was not being invited to play with cool kids. She wasn't in the gang, she wasn't invited to birthday parties, and her origin story is all about feeling left out and not being acceptable, and her face not fitting. And then as an adult, as a business owner, her imposter was showing up as with a story of you don't belong here. Get back in your lane, you're just a recruiter, not a serious businesswoman, and she was absolutely petrified of kind of showing up amongst her peers. So the work that we did together was about reprogramming that belief that she doesn't fit in, having to behave a certain way in order to be acceptable. So we reprogrammed that, and she was able to follow her dreams basically, and launch the consultancy and network as a peer with the big scary CEOs. So step one is to have a little think about your origin story. Has anybody got an inkling of what theirs might be? Anybody? You don't need to say it out loud, but the cog's starting to turn about what your origin memory might be. Yeah, a few nods. Cool. Step two is question. If you are triggered by something and you feel that imposter kick in, I want you to remember this questioning sequence. Maybe we can distribute it with slides or the recording a little bit later on. Really good thing to do. This sounds bonkers and is extra to what I'm about to tell you here, but if you find the imposter syndrome kicking in, I want you to look at your hand, because you can't think about anything else than looking at your hand if you're looking at your hand, and it just gives you that pattern interrupter and that space to think, to buy yourself some time to go through the sequence. So here's the 3-step questioning sequence. Question one is, what is the story I'm telling myself here? What narrative am I attaching to this situation? What layers, what story, what meaning am I attaching to this situation? Then question 2A is it honest? And this is where people get a bit unstuck, because they try and say that they try and be dishonest and not acknowledge their feelings. And what we have to do is work through those, process those feelings in some ways. Then otherwise, if we don't, if we try and squash them down and bury them in, suppress them and ignore them, then they tend to come out in really odd ways that aren't necessarily career enhancing. So we want to do something to process those feelings. So that could be, well, for me, it's running, it's yoga, it's journaling, it's dancing to 90s boy bands. Whatever works for you, but we need to do something physical, even if it's just shaking it off, to move through those feelings. So that's 2A. 2B is it true? And this is where we start to separate the fact from the fiction. So, is it true? 99 times out of 100, there'll be layers upon layer of a tiny bit of truth that's right at its centre. And once you acknowledge that the story that you're telling yourself isn't true, it leaves room for question 3, which is it helpful? Is it helping you be the kind of person that you want to be, get where you want to go in your career by believing this story? And usually, no, it's not helpful. So Anya had just lost out on a client that she lost for life, that she thought she had for life, sorry. And she was beating herself up over it and telling herself that she was rubbish, she had no business being in business. And she was pretty bitter about the whole thing, sorry. So the story she was telling herself was that she was rubbish and useless and it was all her fault, basically. So was it honest? Yes, it was honest. It was how she was feeling. We don't want to ignore that, remember. Was it true? No, absolutely not. The only fact that she had in this situation was that the client had opted to work for somebody else or work with somebody else. So was it helpful? Absolutely not, because she was wasting an absolutely brilliant opportunity to go out and find a bigger and better client by being bitter. Does that make sense? Cool. We don't want unhelpful narratives. So step 3 is reprogramming. So now you're aware of what's going on, it is time to choose a new story. One that helps you get where you want to be in your career and your life, and that over time it's going to become as familiar as that old origin story. So all your life, up until you do this work, you've been finding evidence, you've been finding supporting facts to support this origin story. And what we're doing is reprogramming it. So the alternative information was always there, it's just that you up until now you chose to believe one path, whereas what we're doing is giving the opportunity to choose the other. So look back at your origin story. What could turn that imposter into impactful? So Anya, her "you're a failure" was turned into "here is an opportunity to level up and do something different." You got here by luck could be "I'm grateful for my situation and I make the most of it every day." "You're a fraud" could be "I'm worthy of my success." So just have a little think and come and see me afterwards if you want some help with some reprogramming. So let's talk about Alicia. So she's the ops director of a large international tech company. When she came to me, she was absolutely crippled by imposter syndrome. She was basically worried that she was going to be found out and fired. And she was scared to make any big decisions in case she was visible and was in the line of fire if it turned out to be the wrong decisions. And the irony was that she was in the line to get fired anyway because she wasn't actually making the decisions that she was hired to do. And her imposter was saying, "You're not good enough for this role, you only got the job because you're a woman," and they needed to tick a box essentially. So the reprogramming belief that we worked on became, "I am good enough and I don't give a shit," which is what she came up with. It worked for her, and she's now up for several awards. Step 4 is troubleshooting. So be prepared for things to go wrong when you're doing this work. Fears are going to pop up. This won't work for me, this is just who I am, this is a load of old mumbo jumbo. This is just your mind trying to keep you safe. Back to the old familiar. Self-sabotage might happen, and then you get to say, "See, I knew this wouldn't work for me." This is just your mind trying to keep you safe. Other people's imposter and negativity might be triggered. They might say things like "you've changed" or "you're different" or "what you're trying to do." That's a whole session in itself, but just remember for now that is their shit, not yours, and it's just your mind trying to keep you safe. The solution to this is slow and steady reprogramming. Remember, we don't do things quickly with willpower and pushing and aggressiveness because then they just snap right back and ricochet back to the norm. And what we want to do is work with your subconscious like a friend, gently take it by the hand, slowly and surely reprogram every day, do something to reprogram gently. So Jo, I love working with Jo. She had launched her online fitness program 3 times. So the first time she panicked about money and gave up and ran back to her day job. The second time she launched it, she panicked that she got a load of clients, then she panicked she wouldn't actually be able to deliver what she said she was going to deliver them. Panicked, went back to the day job. And then the third time, we sat down together and we mapped out a really, really slow burn roadmap for her that felt exciting and it didn't feel scary, and she is now absolutely smashing it. The point is that she was going really in this really frantic, desperate, all or nothing energy, which was just not working. And then step 5 is practice. So do something every day to continue on your journey of reprogramming your imposter. There's a brilliant who's heard of Zig Ziglar? Yeah, a few people, yeah. Mindset is like a shower. You need to do it every day or you start to stink. Little secret, your imposter is always going to be there, and it's your job to do the work to keep it at bay so it doesn't stop you from doing what you want to do. This strategy works if you implement it, if you do it. Imposter syndrome doesn't need to stop you from doing what you want to do. A couple of ideas about how you can do this work every day. Number 1 is learn to receive. No more self-deprecation or apologising or minimising when you get a compliment. Just say thank you. Practice it tomorrow. Just say thank you. Number 2 is acclimatise. So this work is like climbing Everest. If you went straight, I don't know enough about mountain climbing to continue this analogy, but basically trying to climb Everest straight away, you die from lack of oxygen. So what you need to do is go to base camp, acclimatise, go to the next level, acclimatise, go to the next level, and just give your body and your nervous system and all the bits that make you time to catch up, basically. And then number 3 is make this an ongoing practice. Dream big, have high hopes for yourself. You know, those dreams you had when you were a kid, tap back into those, refuse to settle, and just make yourself accountable. I can't believe I'm saying this, can't believe I've become this person, but I get up at 5 o'clock every day for yoga, meditation, EFT, and journaling. And this is a new practice I've been doing about 8 weeks, and I'm on fire. It's absolutely brilliant. But I'm not suggesting you have to get up at 5 o'clock to do this work, but the point is that you find something that works for you and you do it. So that's it. So once you know how to break free of your imposter syndrome, you can have the success you're born to have, stop waiting for permission, rip up the rule book and live life on your terms, shine as brightly as you were born to do, inspire and lift other people up around you. Just imagine if you started doing this work and then you got to cascade it to other people as well. And then step into your limitless potential and those dreams that you had when you were a kid. So that's it from me. I offer anybody who comes to my talks, and if there's been any stuff that's come up for you around your imposter syndrome, I offer anybody who's been to my talks a free breakthrough session with me online, if you fancy that. No obligations, no obligation around it, just an opportunity to talk through any stuff that's come up for you. If you fancy having that, come and grab me afterwards, find me on LinkedIn, we can have a chat. Any questions? Sally?
What's EFT?
I'm going to sound like a right hippie weirdo here. It's emotional freedom technique, tapping essentially. So it uses acupuncture points to move energy around the body. It's a bit woo, but it's good stuff.
It's work, isn't it?
Yeah. Hey,
I noticed that your case studies were all ladies' names. Does imposter...
we're all what, sorry?
Were all ladies' names. Does imposter syndrome differ with different kind of groups of diversity?
So this is really, really interesting. When Gail Matthews et al. Did the study in the 70s, the first centred on women because they thought it was a predominantly female phenomenon, but they were getting more and more contacts from men who were saying, well, what about us? And studies have shown since then that it's men, women, anything in between. There doesn't seem to be a gender disparity with it. It's just 70% of professionals. The examples I gave are all women because that's who tend to come to me and work with me. And these examples do work with men as well. Love working with men, but these examples are just women.
Thank you.
Welcome. Anybody else?
Seems like a lot of psychology in it as well, in what you do. Is that right?
It's what?
There's a lot of psychology in what you do as well.
A lot of psychology.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not a qualified psychologist, make that very, very clear, but yeah, the mind's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Once I discovered this work in imposter syndrome, a lot of stuff clicked into place for me. And I'm learning and educating myself about it all the time. And there's a lot more to go on it, but yeah, I can't explain the science behind it, but it's a strategy that works.
It's evolutionary, isn't it, I think?
Yeah, exactly.
Survival forever, keeping us safe.
Yeah, exactly that. It's the whole fight or flight mechanism, the adrenaline, safety first. But we don't need those responses anymore, do we?
Definitely works though. So I used to take more than one on those 7, and now I only say 1.
Nice.
Thanks to our session last year.
Oh, thanks. Didn't even pay you.
So we have a late.
Well, it's
See, I wouldn't have said that either.
that's really, really interesting. So that's amazing. But so what changed for you then? What are these strategies that work particularly for you, or what's been the most powerful for you?
Understanding the origin story and the fact that you're not lying to yourself, but you're kidding yourself to stay in your box.
Yeah.
And giving yourself permission to be who other people actually think you are, not who you think they think you are, whatever you said before.
Yes.
That one.
Yes.
Just kind of accepting the fact that you got the job because you were having the job and you are actually good, and that was you, not you just winged it. And that kind of stuff, just and the practice in it as well.
Yeah.
It really has worked.
Yeah, it's stepping into your power and your authority and claiming it as well, rather than apologising and you know, waiting for permission to do what you want.
Being okay with it.
Yeah, I'm so pleased it's working for you.
Me too.
Hello.
I think the talk's really valuable, and I don't mean in any way to reduce it, because obviously it's got like a limited scope, right? We can't talk about everything. But I guess I'd love to just hear you talk briefly about the fact that like you can't always do everything, right? The imposter syndrome is an internal limiter, but we talk about, you know, like institutional prejudice that is an external limiter, that if you if you reduce the impact of your imposter syndrome and aren't able to achieve, that's not a problem with you not being able to do that. It's a problem with the wider institutions.
Absolutely, and that's why I'm really pleased that I was able to talk with Chris tonight, because it's two sides of the conversation, isn't it? Where I come at it is from a place of authenticity. So I think it's the individual's responsibility to bring their whole selves to work, and it's the employer's responsibility to provide that psychological safety, so people can be real and vulnerable in who they are. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Answer your
completely.
question? Yeah.
That kind of played into a question that I had, which is around how the same traits in men and women are seen positively in men and negatively in women.
That's a
So
big
that-
conversation.
Yeah. Well, I just wondered if you had any comments on that. So your view is that the important thing is you feel comfortable bringing your values and your personal self to work, that you should be able to kind of break free of those restrictions.
Yeah, I think so. It's a really interesting debate, the whole men versus women and the role that patriarchal society has had on imposter syndrome and that kind of thing. I guess where I come at it's from the just the individual's responsibility to kind of take the time to know who they are for themselves and what their values are. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Yeah.
It's such an interesting conversation, isn't it? And one I'd really love to get into.
I think it works both ways as well. Like, you know, men go to baby groups with their babies, for example. I know my husband was quite uncomfortable at first because he was the only bloke there,
Yeah.
and kind of, you know, looking after the children in front of all those women. Kind of like, are they going to be judging me? They're going to think I'm useless. I can't do a plat. You know, that kind of thing. It does work both ways, I think, and what we said before, you know, that men and women both suffer from imposter syndrome. They really, really do.
Yeah.
And it's funny when, not funny, interesting, when you get to understand theirs as well, and those kind of like societal norms and doing anything outside of that. It does rear its head, doesn't it? You should be doing babysitting your children type of attitude.
Yeah, it comes back to that psychological safety for me of employers, as we're talking about that, and recruiters as well. Opening up the conversation, facing into those conversations as well. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer to it, but it's about not ignoring conversation and talking about things, and kind of meeting people where they are with it. Does that make any sort of sense?
Mm-hmm. Like you say, it's not. It's quite intrinsic to you, isn't it? There's a lot of other factors around that are other influences on you that you've kind of, I guess, you've got to work out how best to navigate it as a whole as well.
Yeah, it's an ongoing conversation, and that's why conversations like this is so important. You know, where we can come in and ask questions and talk about things, and you know, somebody might stand up and say, "Clay, full of shit," with what you're talking about, and you know that's absolutely their prerogative. But I don't stand here claiming to know all the answers. All I know is what's worked for me and my clients, and I'm hoping to share that with whoever needs to hear that today. It lands with the right person. We're about done. Cool, right. Thank you very much for your attention, everybody.
so we do have half an hour where you're more than welcome to stay, more than welcome to leave. We have a little bit of food left. So yeah, do as you please really. I won't be offended if you leave, but if you want to stay as well, then feel free to. I really appreciate everyone coming along. Loads of new faces, which is great. And I'll share the slides, provided that's okay with you both. Yeah. And there'll be links for our YouTube channel so you can see all the other content we've had before. And hopefully, see you again. It's brilliant. Thank you.